Welcome to Folks Punjabi. Edmonton is facing growing concern over flooding, public safety, rising taxes, homelessness, and transit. Joining us today is Edmonton Mayor Andrew Knack. Welcome to Folks Punjabi, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you so much for having me.
Mr. Mayor, recent storms flooded roads and many home basements. What immediate steps will the city take to prevent this from happening again?
So back in 2019, the city of Edmonton approved a $1.6 billion flood mitigation program that is a 20-year program that we're now 7 years into, where we're upgrading stormwater management infrastructure, adding new stormwater ponds as an example, upgrading different utility lines. And this is being done to recognize that the city and the weather patterns of what used to be a 1 in 100 year flood is now happening, one every 10 or every 20 years. And so we recognize that this was going to be something that was an issue many years ago and have already started down the path. With that said, and I always think it's important to remind folks that even with this program, which will make the overall city more flood resilient, there are still actions that people can take as individual homeowners. EPCOR here in Edmonton will do a free flood prevention review to make sure that there are steps you can take for your own home independent of city infrastructure to make your home more flood resilient.
Okay. Property taxes continue to rise. When will residents actually see better value for the money they are paying, sir?
My expectation is going into this next 4-year budget, that's when people will see it. So we have a couple of months left before we start debating the 2027 to 2030 operating capital budget. And I had made a motion last year to completely restructure how this budget process is moving forward. And my expectation is that people will see an improvement in the quality services that they expect, because, at the end of the day, a common piece of feedback I hear from Edmontonians is that it's not that they're opposed to paying more in property taxes, but if they're not seeing an increase in their service, if they're not seeing better value, that's where they get really frustrated. And it's where I think a lot of council was frustrated, and it's why we're doing this whole new process. So ideally, starting early 2027, when the new budget takes effect, people can start to see that difference.
Okay. Many people still don't feel safe using the LRT. What is your timeline to make the transit truly safe?
Well, again, this is an example of something that started a couple of years ago. So about 3 years ago, the City of Edmonton Council at the time approved funding to more than double the number of transit peace officers. At the same time, there's now a dedicated group of 50 Edmonton police officers who work on the transit system. And between our police officers and our transit peace officers, they work in partnership with our social agencies. And now that the police have been tracking transit safety stats specifically, what they have seen in the last 2.5 years since they've been tracking this is a steady improvement in safety on our system. Still work to do. It's why, as of just about 2 weeks ago, on July 2nd, we saw another 30 transit peace officers start on the system. So they have been hired, they've been fully trained, and they're now working on the system. And why we're continuing to work with the provincial government to make progress on mental health and addiction, so that folks that are struggling have the care and support they need in the right places, instead of using a transit center as their place of refuge.
That's a nice idea. Downtown homelessness and open drug use remain major concerns. Is the city current approach working properly?
Well, I would say the city approach on its own is not effective at the level it needs to be. And it's why we've been working closely with the provincial government to try to see some action on this, because housing and homelessness, mental health and addictions is actually provincial jurisdiction. And yet we don't want to sit back waiting for the province to act. It's why we started to make more city land available to build more permanent housing where you can have recovery beds. And it's why I've been working very closely with the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions to try to create some additional programs and beds and spaces so that people aren't out on the street, whether that's in the downtown or out in our suburban communities, because we now see folks that are struggling not just in the downtown, they're out across the city. So far, what we've seen from the province in the last couple of months is a much greater focus in this space. Over the last year, we've seen the number of people on what's called the by names list, so the number of people who are experiencing homelessness, it's gone down from about 5,000 to 4,000. Still a lot of work because 4,000 is still way too many, but it's great to see the progress that the province is starting to make, and we're going to continue to work with them. I'm hoping throughout this year we'll continue to have more announcements from the province that are a direct example of collaboration between the city and the province to make this to make progress on this in a quick way, because the work needs to happen very quickly.
I understand that city is already working on this issue. Many Edmontonians say that they feel less safe today than they did a few years ago. What is your message to them?
Well, I think they're right to feel the way they feel, right? And you're right. There's this interesting tension of that the actual stats citywide from Edmonton Police Service show that the city is safer today than it was a decade ago. But if I were to ask almost any Edmontonian if they actually feel safer, they would say no. And that goes back to the topics we've just been discussing, because at the end of the day, if you're out in a space, if you're out in your home community and you see somebody struggling with mental health and addictions, or if you're in our downtown or any part of the city, those folks are not going to create a safety risk per se, but if you see disorder, that contributes to your feeling of safety and security. It contributes to the feeling of your family's safety and security. And it's why we're taking action and working with the province on trying to get those folks into the right spaces, to get them the right care that they need, so that they're not using drugs in open spaces, that instead they're in a place going through a recovery center so they can get healing and begin their recovery journey. Because we can put a police officer on every corner, but that's not going to fix the problem if these folks who are struggling with things like mental health and addictions don't have a space to go to. You can't solve the problem, and we've heard from our own previous police chief that you can't arrest your way out of homelessness. You need to actually create real permanent solutions that will have a positive impact on both the folks who are struggling, but also the broader community, so people feel that safety and security that they deserve.
Your critics say City Hall is better at making announcements than delivering results. What is the biggest promise you believe your administration has failed to deliver?
The biggest one that we failed to deliver, that's a great question. I think a lot of what this council's working on right now is completely restructuring how we do our system. So at this point, we've delivered on the things that I've committed to in the campaign, such as creating day spaces throughout the winter to give people a place to get off the street into housing or into social supports. And we're in the process of completely rebuilding the budget from the ground up. The proof will be once it actually gets approved and implemented starting in the new year. So I think that's the one that I would encourage folks, that I won't say that job is done yet, and I knew it wouldn't be done yet.
Right.
But it's the one I feel confident is going to be delivered on, but it's also the one that people need to hold us accountable to as we go into our budget deliberations later this year.
And my last and quick question is, if the residents still see no real improvement in the safety, flooding, and affordability over the next year, then who should be held accountable for that?
You would absolutely hold council accountable, and because at the end of the day, the buck stops with us as a city council, with me as mayor. I'm confident people will see progress, because things like flood mitigation, that work is already underway. That program has been ongoing for 7 years, and we're seeing the changes and the impact of it. It's why we're in much better shape in Edmonton than they are in Calgary. And on the safety and security side, I expect to see more changes by the end of this year that will help further that work. So I would expect people hold me accountable to that.
So, Mayor Knack, thank you for joining us and answering our questions. We appreciate your time. Thank you.